people that want to know what the heck's going down. So down there in the Capitol. So I think it might be a good idea to touch on it.
Very good.
Okay, all right.
Well, we are going to start. So welcome, everyone. This is Gary Borgendale. We get to find a little bit of our beginning conversation. I'm your guest host tonight for Alpha Live and First Tuesday Conservatives. And so what we try to do is bring those topics together that our listeners really want to learn more about. And so this time, we are bringing two experts to talk about election integrity. And with us tonight is Andy Cilek. He's the Executive Director of Minnesota Voters Alliance. So welcome, Andy. Good to have you with us.
Thanks, Gary.
Kim Crockett is with us as well. She is the Legal Policy Advisor for Minnesota Voter Alliance as well. So welcome, Kim.
Thank you.
Andy, can you tell us a little bit more about the Minnesota Voter Alliance and what that organization is about?
Sure. Well, we started about 16 years ago. We got involved in a petition, just a local referendum regarding election formats. You know, how should we elect our city council and mayor? Should it be on a nonpartisan basis, on a partisan basis? As we know, a lot of the big cities have ranked choice voting and so forth. But anyway, we've just been a grassroots organization. We're relatively small. We've stayed that way for about 16 years. We get in a very limited number of issues by design. And over the years, we've had our share of wins, and we've also had our share of losses, in which we want to believe that we gained a lot from those decisions as well. And as you mentioned, we had our biggest victory in the U.S. Supreme Court 2.5 years ago or something like that, in a free speech First Amendment case, which has been cited in 45, last I heard, 45 federal lawsuits regarding free speech and what statute can say. What the Supreme Court ruled in our case, which I always forget to even mention when I'm talking about it, is it had to do with apparel and what you can wear when you go vote. And the statute bans political and campaign material. And our complaint was with political apparel because they targeted the Tea Party patriots. So the policy just said, if you have a Tea Party, any Tea Party apparel, you are going to be prohibited from voting. And the Supreme Court took the case, and they said that you're right, it's overly broad, and if Minnesota wants to ban political apparel, they can try to do so, but they have to define it. And I don't think anybody wants the job of trying to define what's political or not. For example, NPR, a lot of people I know think NPR is political. So if you had a shirt that said NPR on it, it depends who the election judge was, you could be turned away from voting. So those are just some of the issues. Our main issues in the last couple of years have been focused on in the legal arena regarding absentee ballot boards. And our overall goal is to get party balance review when examining absentee ballots, which when we started looking into this, Gary, a year and a half ago, we found out there was no party balance at all examining the absentee ballots, which is now about 2/3 of all the voting.
Andy, let me step in there. When you say party balance, what do you mean by that?
Well, just as it sounds, a Republican and a Democrat, one from each party, examining the ballot to make sure it before it gets accepted, it has to go through 6 designated criteria that's right in the statute. They have to match the Social Security number, the driver's license number, if there is a driver's license. They have to make sure the signatures match and those sorts of things. They have to make sure they're registered and they live in the precinct. So there's a defined set of 6 things that have to be met. And what we're finding out is that I think depending on who's reviewing them, more ballots are going to get accepted depending on who's reviewing them and if there's not bipartisan overview. But just to give you an example, in 2008, when we had some bipartisan oversight of absentee ballots, there were 300,000 ballots cast, 12,000 of them were rejected, which comes out to 4%. So the Democrats have been fighting every single year to bring that number down. And last year we had almost 2 million ballots cast, and there was a 1% rejection rate. And that's what happens when you get all your friends, most of them probably in AFSCME, examining the absentee ballots.
Yeah.
Good, good. Well, thank you for that. And Kim Crockett, tell us, I know that one of the things I got to know Kim with, that she did a radio program with us on AM 1280 The Patriot, and it was good conversation with a lot of humor, Kim, with a lot of humor.
Yes, Gary.
And she was really bringing up what was going on, the issues for the election, leading up to the election in November and post of that relative to the outcome. Kim, talk a little bit about your involvement with this year's election, and then also what your relationship is with Minnesota Voter Alliance as the legal policy advisor.
Well, I'll just answer the second one first. Andy is amazing because he attracts really smart people to help him. I am one of, how many people, Andy? 6, 8, 10. He has an orbit of just incredibly dedicated volunteers, mostly volunteers around him, and then an incredible set of lawyers that love to work with him. And he is tireless and creative in his approach to bringing integrity to Minnesota specifically. And I got involved because my alarm bells were going off in 2019 as we were headed into what we all knew would be a momentous and unfortunately what we all knew would be a messy, chaotic election for a variety of reasons.
Especially when you throw COVID into it and all that as well.
Right. And so Andy's been kind enough to let me tuck in as one of his advisors. I'm not terribly involved in the litigation that absorbs most of his time, which is bringing integrity to those absentee ballot boards by having a long-standing tradition in Minnesota, which is to have party balance. As Andy said, we have a long tradition of having both a Republican and a Democrat present in the precinct. And so for your listeners, when you think about voting, some of you are old enough to remember this and some of you are younger and it will sound foreign, but most of us used
to- Try me, come on, try me. Okay,
well,
I gotta see, okay.
We all, the three of us grew up voting in a precinct on election day.
Correct.
It was a big deal. And then at some point in our nation, the idea of absentee balloting came in, and it was like, well, voting is really important. What if I have to travel, or I've got surgery that day, or something's some work related thing is going on, and in Minnesota there were a lot of snowbirds, right, who wanted to leave before election day. So over time, we have gone from election day voting, and then initially you had to have an excuse to do absentee ballot voting, to now where this last year, as Andy said, there were 3.2 million ballots cast in total, but 1.9 million of those were absentee ballots.
Say that again. This is Minnesota now, right?
Just Minnesota. We had a total of 3.2 million people vote, or ballots recorded by the Secretary of State's office, and 1.9 million of them were cast by absentee ballot.
Wow.
Yes. And
wow.
Andy, I'm trying to remember, I think 2018, what did we hit, 600,000?
Yeah, I think it was like 670,000 or something like that, Kim.
Right, so we went from less than 700,000, which is still a huge number, and 2016 was even tinier, to now 1.9 million ballots. And what Andy had discovered is that you know, following the 2008 debacle between Coleman and Franken, the legislature, actually in a bipartisan fashion, and then after the Tom Emmer gubernatorial close race with Dayton, they changed the rules to explicitly require party balance for absentee ballot boards. And what Minnesota Voters Alliance discovered is that, although we don't have I haven't read the complete history that one of his phenomenal other advisors just put together, we really haven't ever followed that law. And since that time, where it said you gotta kind of mimic, if you will, the in-person voting integrity through the absentee process. That's what the party balance rule in part is about. Because when I go into a precinct and vote in my little town, right, if I do it on election day, there's a Republican and a Democrat sitting there, ideally. That's always been the tradition. Some cities like Minneapolis and maybe others don't do so hot in that area. And that's something that Republicans, frankly, can help with more. And that's another topic. But so when we require it on the absentee ballot boards, the reason why Andy is so energetic about this issue, and he's got lawsuits filed in multiple jurisdictions, is that it's supposed to mimic that in-person integrity of the precinct. So when I'm sitting down with a pile of ballots on the absentee ballot board, I'm sitting across from my political opponent, if you will, you know, the other major party, and it's not hostile. We're keeping each other honest.
Right.
That's what it's about.
That's good. That's very good.
Yeah, I can't mess with your ballots. You can't mess with mine. We have to
That's a great way to put it, Carol.
we have to
love
that those signatures look right. And if they don't, there's a process, right?
That's great.
And it's all in state statute. So Andy's been doing an amazing job pursuing this in court. And while he's not a lawyer, he plays one on TV, right, Andy?
Absolutely.
What I've been doing is trying to draw attention to it. My work over the years has been, you know, as a lawyer, but also as a writer and advocate, speaker. Right. You know, as you mentioned, Gary, I did my Wake Up Minnesota election show last fall, trying to get people to vote in person. That was one of my goals in having that radio show. Though Andy always said to me, Kim, I just want people to vote. Don't discourage them. And it was like, no, but I want their vote to count.
Right.
And in my opinion, voting in person or going down to City Hall was the best way to do that, especially given what we know about these absentee ballot boards. They are, let me just finish the thought and then I'll be quiet. I can tell you when I say something. There are 87 counties in Minnesota. Because of Andy and the Minnesota Voters Alliance, 2 counties finally followed the law this last time. Ramsey County, which is huge, the second most populous county in the state, and then Olmsted County also followed the law. And Andy got the people up in Lake County through some pressure and some amazing citizens up there to also start to understand what the law actually says versus what Steve Simon, our ne'er-do-well Secretary of State, says about absentee ballot. So that's what
I want to jump back in here and say that this is Gary Borgendale. I'm your host for this evening. I'm also the local ministry director for AM 980, The Mission, and our sister station, AM 1280, The Patriot. So we have a lot of these conservative conversations on there as well. And tonight our guests are Andy Cilek and Kim Crockett, and they're both with the Minnesota Voters Alliance, and we're talking about election integrity. And so I want to kind of move forward here a little bit. And Kim, and part of the question I'm going to formulate as we go forward is really, is there issues with election integrity in Minnesota and beyond, But I just wanted, before we answer that question, Kim, what were you involved with after the election this year? I know that you were involved in some of the things here in Minnesota post-election, as well as in Wisconsin and Georgia. Share a little bit about with us and why this is important for our listeners is to hear. John Adams made Benjamin Franklin made this comment about what kind of government do we have after they put the Constitution together. A republic, if you can keep it. And a republic, if you can keep it, requires all of us as citizens to be engaged. And so that's why our listeners out there, you have that opportunity to be engaged in the election integrity process as well. So that's why we want to have this conversation. But Kim, go ahead and share a little bit about post-election activities that you were engaged in.
Well, first, I'm trying to get a straight face going instead of a smile and answer your other question, which is, Minnesota has the highest voter turnout in the nation at 80%, and we have no voter fraud here in Minnesota, according to our Secretary of State.
We'll come back to that, deal that a little bit more.
I'm trying to have a straight face. I can't
Okay.
keep it. I just keep laughing at the idea. The answer is, of course, there's problems here. But
Right.
but then I'll answer your other question. But I have to take off my 501c3 hat at Minnesota Voters Alliance to talk about what I did as a citizen, because I was helping the Republican Party and the Trump victory team specifically as a volunteer attorney and citizen. So what did I see at the war? We have a lot of work to do. I'll just, without going into detail, because I've spoken to a lot of BPOUs and
In Minnesota.
congressional districts here in Minnesota about some ideas I have for what we can do to improve, to be ready. And this would apply, well, to some extent to the Democrat Party. And then we also have marijuana parties here in Minnesota as well. But for the GOP, when I was helping
Kim,
them,
the marijuana parties, did they get enough ballots this year to continue to be
Andy,
registered as a party?
I don't know.
Okay.
we're hoping they were too busy smoking pot
Yeah.
to do that. I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure
I don't know anybody in the marijuana party. I haven't heard, I haven't looked. I don't know the answer.
hang out with them, Gary. I don't know about
Yeah.
you. No, I'm just
I
teasing.
gave that up when I was about 15, is when I had my last one.
There's a
My
run
last
on
taste.
pizza. There's a run on pizza with that group.
So I'll tell you, they didn't get any lists in that I know of to be election judges. And that's one of the areas. So one of the things Andy has also brought attention to at Minnesota Voters Alliance is that the League of Minnesota Cities is saying, well, it's too hard to find Republicans to meet party balance requirements here in Minnesota. So let's just get rid of the requirement. I mean, talk about obnoxious.
Let's just get rid of the Republicans is what they meant.
Right. And they
Let's just get rid of the Republicans.
They
Yeah.
pretend to be a sort of nonpartisan lobbying group for Minnesota cities. I'll tell you, when I was on the council in Deep Haven, I pulled our membership from those people because it was really
Good.
obvious who they were. And if you're sitting on a city council, any of you listening, do the same thing. So they made a good point, which is that sometimes county election officials and city officials working in elections have a hard time finding enough Republicans. And so that's an area where we can do a better job as citizens to make sure that we are participating in the process. And I hope I'm wrong, Gary, but I think we're going to still see mask requirements. I think we're going to have more of these health or environmental emergencies where Secretary of State Simon or whoever's got the job will argue, oh, well, we have to have all these COVID accommodations because voting in person isn't safe. But also we've gotten flabby as a citizenry, thinking we can just phone it in.
Right.
My kids probably want to vote on this,
Right.
right? But I'll tell you, the only real process that still has the greatest integrity, my greatest confidence, is voting in person. But there are things we can do, and there was real weakness in that system here in Minnesota. And again, that's something that I think BPOUs, congressional districts, and then working with the Republican Party in the state can fix. The other
Kim,
thing
I'm
that
going to jump in here with a question, if you will, and may bring a smile to your face. On Ginny Clavor's virtual town hall, she claimed Minnesota's #1 issue is climate change. When I challenged her, this is from Jackie, when I challenged her on that and said, I think its election integrity was very important to Minnesotans, she claimed we had the most honest elections without any fraud.
Yeah, sure we do. Oh yeah, you betcha. Yeah, we'd need a full hour to go into all the problems. If nothing else, what we talked about before is going from 0 to 100 on absentee ballots over a very short period of time. First of all, we are a lawless state in that regard. We're ignoring some of the most basic protections in the absentee balloting process. But let's even go back further from that and look at Minnesota's sloppy voting procedures. We don't have, okay, so let me tell you a story. I worked for the RNC down at the US Senate elections in Georgia.
Okay.
And, I was in DeKalb County, put in some long hours the early part of January down there.
So this is for the Senate race.
This is for the US Senate race, the runoff,
Okay. Yep.
where they ended up sending 2 communists to Congress from Georgia. It was very sad, very hard week. But I'm sitting there with 2 Democrat lawyers, working with them. We were doing ballot reconciliation. They were doing it for the Democrats. I was doing it for the Republicans. And I was visiting with them, and I told them, in Minnesota, we don't have voter identification. They were like, really? You don't have to have identification to vote? And I said, no, we haven't had that. I don't know how long, Andy, how long has it been since you needed voter ID in Minnesota? A long time.
At least 20 years.
Oh yeah, because we're also honest and tell the truth all the time.
It's called Minnesota Nice.
And then the Democrat lawyers turned to me and they said, well, you've got provisional balloting though, don't you? I said, no, we don't have that either. So for your listeners, what that means is if I walk in without identification and I fill out a ballot, in most other states, that ballot gets set aside and I have about a week to prove that I am who I said I was so that my vote can count. And they couldn't, their mouths were hanging open. These were 2 Democrat activist attorneys down in Georgia. So Minnesota's got really serious integrity issues in its voting laws.
Let me step back here a little bit now and connect back in with Andy. Andy, talk to us about who can vote in Minnesota and where is that source document for who can vote in Minnesota?
That's a great question, Gary. It lists it out right in the Minnesota Constitution in Article 7, Section 1. I just happen to remember it because we focused on it for a long time, but it's real short, and anybody can punch it up in their search engine or Google or Bing or whatever, and it'll come right up. Just put Minnesota Constitution, Article 7, Section 1, and it'll list out who's eligible and who's not eligible. It's straightforward.
You share a little bit about what that is. It's 18 years of age. It's a United States citizen. I believe it's a resident of where they've lived for 30 days. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of these things.
I think we're
Yeah, I
down
think
to
it's
20
30 days. It's
20
30
days
days,
now.
but I think there's case law that says it's
Right.
20.
20.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in Minnesota, if you've been a felon, that you cannot vote.
No, I'm going to correct you there. You can vote as soon as you complete your sentence,
As soon as you complete your sentence. Okay.
your full sentence. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So it's pretty straightforward of who is eligible to vote. Now,
Yep.
can dead people vote?
Technically, they're not supposed to, but we're Minnesota nice, so Hey, I think anything goes. I mean, we're
It would
dealing
be
with
so
people.
rude to say
We're
no.
dealing with people led by Steve Simon, who is absolutely ruthless. He doesn't have an ounce of integrity in his body. The guy's a crook, if you ask me, and he should be recalled. But people in the media in this town just slobber all over him. They just believe everything he says. Even people that you would think would be in the middle of the road, like Tom Hauser from Channel 5. And Simon can just do no wrong. He's slick, he's smooth, he's smart. And I'm not surprised how they dominate every year down at the Capitol. And they're more prepared than we are. They do their homework. Our side hasn't been. And so, as Kim mentioned earlier, I think there's just a lot of work to do. And that's the message I want to convey to anybody that watches this, is there's a lot we can do. And Kim and I were talking about that earlier this afternoon. You don't have to wait for these lawsuits to run its course. They take a long time. Could even end up in federal court, even after state court. So you don't know. But as Kim mentioned, we made progress in Ramsey County and in Olmsted County. Right after we filed, the next day after we filed the lawsuit, the county started calling the Republican election judges from the party list. They had never done that before, ever.
Right.
So I just like to, as I'm on these calls and I'm listening to Kim. Kim, what was that one liner again? Because I'm trying to write that down. We got to get that on the website.
We'll have to watch the. We'll have to
No,
watch
the one
video.
where you said, I won't mess with your ballot.
If
You don't mess with mine.
with mine. Yeah.
That's a classic.
Don't
We got to
mess
get
with
that
mine.
up on the.
Yeah.
But
I'm glad
so
you liked it.
but I encourage people to to get together with people in their own BPOU, whatever party they're in. We're not affiliated directly with any party. We're a nonpartisan group. But if people would do what some of the folks that we've been working with have done in Ramsey County, and Olmsted County, and Lake County, and Duluth, Donna Bergstrom's done a wonderful job up there. It's just going to the city or the county website and finding their resolution to create a ballot board and assign election judges. That's the starting point. Find out what your city and county did. And if it's not listed on there, in the resolution, sometimes they just keep it real vague, and it says, we hereby establish a ballot board, right? That's all it says.
Right.
But find out who they are and Google them and find out who these people are that are really overseeing your elections. I think that's the biggest thing I want to leave with people is make a note of it tomorrow or next week. Go to your county website or your city website, start asking some questions. Who does the review of absentee ballots? Find a resolution. There'll be a county board resolution, most likely. And in a bigger city, there'll be sometimes the cities handle their ballot. Find out who they are and start asking questions, because I think we can start banging some doors down. And I think we're going to have to get a little tough. And we're going to, as my dad always used to say, we have to be determined and persistent. And we just can't take no for an answer, because they took our seats. The Republicans had a right to those seats on every ballot board in Minnesota, and Steve Simon and Joe Mansky swindled them right out of their seats. And it's time to stand up and get their seats back.
Let me step in here. We've got another question that came up, and I really want to try to respond to these questions. This is Jackie.
I saw it.
You saw that poll challenger in St. Luke's Park, and could not believe how many people signed up at the poll to vote. It was a high apartment area, so perhaps something to do with it. Incidentally, I think the precinct had over 90% voter turnout. Honestly, I think many of us want to do something about what's going on, but we just don't know what to do, who to contact, and how to go about it. And I just think that, Andy, you are addressing that. And, I have some friends that are mayors in some of the major cities here in the Twin Cities. There is a lot of integrity with many of these voter entities that they desperately want to do this right. And they are worked there diligently, but they need help. So reiterate again, I don't know if this is Kim or Andy, about what type of help can you provide and what is needed at that city or county level for voter integrity. Kim?
Andy,
Go ahead,
can I
Kim.
take? Yeah, well, it's something Andy and I are batting around, but so watch for that. This ideally would be, training and infrastructure provided by the political parties, but that doesn't always happen. And so we're having discussions about how maybe Minnesota Voters Alliance in conjunction with other groups could make sure that we do that outreach. So stay tuned on that. One of the things that you'll find, as Andy said, if you go and look at who's been on your ballot board at your county level, is they're all going to be largely Democrats. And shame on us in some ways, because
Right.
there are opportunities, there have been over the years. But this is a quote that people ascribe to me now, but it really is Dinesh D'Souza's, where he said, he was asked after 2020, well, what happened? And he said, well, Republicans focus on campaigns, whereas Democrats focus on the election. And think about that for a moment. And the election starts long before the campaign. It's the election process, it's election laws. Why are the clerk positions, for example, county clerks, election clerks, largely dominated by Democrats? Well, part of it's a union issue, but part of it too is just, introducing ourselves, running for those positions, volunteering for them. In other words, you got to show up, right, to make a difference. And so we'll be talking about this more and more in the future. I have a lot of ideas about it that we will share, and hopefully, Gary, you'll have us back
Okay.
to report back. We'll point to things on the Minnesota Voters Alliance website, but also, and if you're not getting emails, why don't you sign up? Go ahead and go over to Minnesota Voters Alliance and sign up for emails. But
And
also
that
Alpha
website,
News.
say the website again.
Is it mnva.org?
MN Voters with an
Oh,
S.org.
MN Voters. Yeah, and that's a good story too. But yeah, mnvoters.org. And then Alpha News also has an email you can sign up for. And I'll be writing about these things on that widely read news site, because they have a commentary section that I write for.
So, if I was looking at the elections here in Minnesota, and there are so many places where you can have issues. It's from the dead people voting. It's from those that are not rightful citizens in the place that are voting. People that have moved to a different place, if they haven't registered to vote in that area, and if they're a recent move in, really, they're not supposed to be able to vote there. Plus that you look at when you have the transmission of ballots, that there's issues with that. And then there's the actual counting of that. So, I mean, there's a lot of issues going on. And I'm just kind of open this question up, but we're not going to take a whole lot more time. What's going on the Minnesota legislature to deal with any of these issues from election integrity? Andy,
Well,
can you, or Kim, or whoever?
Can I just add something big picture that I want to make sure people understand? There's also another trend going on, major trend going on, and that's been pushed by Democratic secretaries of state now for, years. And that is switching the rural vote, the outstate vote in Minnesota, from precinct level in-person voting to what's called mail-in balloting, where if they are a registered voter, they are mailed a ballot to their home, whether they still live there or not. You can see there's holes in it. It's called mail-in precincts. And we'd like to reverse that trend. And again, watch for something. So that I view that as a suppression of the outstate vote in Minnesota.
Okay.
And it's very purposeful. The other side of that trend, the other side of the coin, is that there is an increase in voter turnout efforts in the cities through these what are they called? Ballot boxes.
Dropbox.
Drop boxes. Mark Zuckerberg spent over $400 million throughout the United States and millions here in Minnesota getting out the vote in progressive blue areas. He wasn't out trying to help outstate voters in Minnesota vote. And so that's a mega trend that's going on here and throughout the United States that I want people to be aware of. And the best thing they can do if they're in outstate Minnesota is talk to their township, talk to their city leaders and say, we're not doing that anymore. We want to vote in person. So legislature, Andy?
Minnesota legislature.
Oh, Minnesota legislature. Yeah, I personally haven't, and I'm glad there's people that are, people can do what they want. But I think that House File 9 that the Democrats came out with the first week of the election was 70 some pages of the worst legislation, election law legislation that I've ever seen, that I could even ever dream up in a million years.
Minnesota, the federal level here now, Andy.
Yeah, I'm talking about Minnesota level.
House File 9 is sort of the counterpart to House HR 1 in Congress.
Right. Yep. It's got, 16-year-olds registering, non-citizens voting, dead people voting, felon voting, being able to assist unlimited numbers of people, anything you could think of that would be bad, it's in there.
It's in there.
And so, my thing is, I think the Republicans have one choice this session for their own livelihood. Also, they have to stop every Democrat election bill. Period. Right. Everything. And if they try to horse trade with them, I think they're going to get smoked like they have in the past. Because I think the Democrats, they live, eat, and breathe this stuff. Right. They prepare for months and years. Our side doesn't, and they just don't have the infrastructure and the in-depth knowledge, and nor do they have the power. I mean, keep in mind, the Democrats have the House, they have the Secretary of State, and they have the governor. So
and AG.
And AG. And I share everybody's concern that we should be able to get something because that's a rational thing. I mean, my God, we had elections that people that we know there were a lot of people that didn't have a lot of confidence in. But I just want to say to people, my opinion is the Democrats are just way too smart for that. They're not going to give an inch. They're not going to give a millimeter. That's not how they operate. And I think it's pretty naive if Republicans go in there thinking they are.
Right. Well, is there something from the Senate in Minnesota that are bringing forward? I mean,
yes.
Okay. Go ahead,
Kim. So it's my understanding this week there was a vote on this in the Senate where conservatives, Republicans have a slight lead, and then there are two independents, Bach and Tomassoni, who it's kind of neat. They've joined that caucus. The idea, as I understand it from the Senate majority, is that they're going to hold out for voter ID, which is a really fundamental good practice, obviously, and also provisional balloting, which is what we had talked about before. Yeah. So that if you don't have ID or there's some problem with your ballot, it gets set aside until it can be resolved in a fairly short period of time. Also, there's a discussion about eliminating ranked choice voting in Minnesota. Ranked choice voting is a very bad idea. I think that's probably the weaker of the three ideas. There isn't anything else that I'm aware of, though I guess, Andy, you said there were some other things in this big omnibus bill. I have not been babysitting this.
I haven't either, Kim, but I just think that the Democrats aren't going to give the Republicans anything. They don't have to. They're in the driver's seat. They're in control. They're just not going to give the Republicans anything. I think the best thing that the Republicans hope for this session all across the state, the best thing that the Republican rank and file can hope for is 100% gridlock. And I know that might sound crazy to some people, but that's the honest to God truth. The Democrats have all the leverage, and the Republicans had leverage 2 years ago when they had $20 million of federal money to go to election security. And Gazelka decided he was single-handedly going to just give all that money to Steve Simon. And I think the damage, a lot of the damage that was done in November was due to all that money being given to Simon, getting absolutely nothing in return. One of the things that we advocated that should have been in there should have been limited provisional ballots in that bill, and there should have been post-election audits in that bill, because that was one of the 6 items that Congress allocated and said that that money was supposed to be spent on. Now, you see Arizona's doing a full post-election audit right now. That's what should be happening right now in Minnesota, but the leadership in the Republican Party literally pissed that away 2 years ago.
We're going to kind of wrap up here in a little bit, but one of the questions that did come up here, can we pass laws to prevent outsiders from doing what Mark Zuckerberg did? That would probably have to be a federal election issue, or it could be a state.
No, let's clear something up right here, right now. Election laws should be handled by and large at the state level. If we start saying there ought to be a law in Congress, guess what you get? You get HR 1, which is a federal takeover of election law.
Right.
It just shoves the states aside and says, no, we know how to run elections. Move over states. No, the Zuckerberg money, for those who don't know, he and his wife founded some fancy sounding C3 called the Center for Tech and, was it? It's CTC.
Civic Life.
Center for Tech and Civic Life.
Civic Life, yeah.
Yeah, sounds really important and good. It's not.
I just read it today in the news. He's in the news today giving more money. Now DeSantis is freaking out because Zuckerberg's going to go after that state for DeSantis election.
Right. So each state legislature that has the horsepower to do it should pass this year legislation that forbids state and local governments from taking what they're essentially doing is they're allowing a private actor to come in and leverage the election system. Imagine if the National Rifle Association had dropped $400 million and spent it in outstate Minnesota and red states. The howling, I mean, I wish they would, because then we would get those laws against private money coming in. The Amistad Project, led by Phil Klein and Eric Cardall here in Minnesota, is working on it. The Zuckerberg money came in and completely replaced the election team in Green Bay, Wisconsin, with a New York firm paid for by Zuckerberg to run the elections in Green Bay, Wisconsin. That's wow. The kind of stuff we're talking about. Here in Minnesota, they bought those ballot boxes, they trained election officials, they did get out the vote. They all but diapered and fed voters in the cities, standing in the election lines to get that vote out. So it's dirty and it's corrupt. But the answer is to pass laws at the state level. Forbidding it.
I want to wrap up here shortly. I just kind of keep going on.
We're having too much fun, Gary.
Yes, I'm getting these questions out here. Now, HR 1, we talked briefly about that. It's really bad. It's a federal takeover of our elections.
Yeah.
What can we do in Minnesota to push back against that? Is that just reaching into our 2 senators and in opposition, or what can we do on HR 1?
Pray. Did you just say pray? Yeah, no, he's right. First, pray. Amy Klobuchar is the chairwoman of the Rules Committee in the U.S. Senate. So we're in a unique position, maybe as Minnesotans, to hammer her office with phone calls. I don't call Tina Smith if you want. I did. I called her office and then I got this sweet email explaining to me why Tina Smith was a co-sponsor of HR 1 and why she's willing to completely give up Minnesota, the right of Minnesotans and the legislature to make our own laws. But Amy Klobuchar is the chair of rules, and they're considering altering the filibuster, which would be a game changer on this legislation and others. So she's worth pressuring. The Minnesota Voters Alliance sent out an e-blast, which is posted on the front. I think it's the first post, Andy, on the front of the Minnesota Voters Alliance website.
I should go there once in a while. It probably is.
I know. That's what the rest of us are for.
I'm trying to remember that. I got the mnvoters.org right. Okay, good.
There's a post on the front page that gives you a list of senators, including Joe Manchin, Kristen Sinema and Mark Kelly from Arizona, John Tester from Montana. And there's a list of people there and their phone numbers where you can call their offices and just say, please do not even consider supporting HR 1. They need to hear from America. They need to hear from Minnesotans.
And I think that's a good place for us to stop because.
Can I get a plug in?
Yep, go ahead, Andy.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, May 6th, next Thursday at 6 o'clock, we were invited to speak up at Willie McCoy's, the Liberty Tea Party Patriots. They're expecting a really good turnout, but we're going to have some of our co-plaintiffs there from Lake County and Ramsey County. And we're also going to have our legal counsel, Eric Cardall is going to be there, Shannon Bruce. Kim, unfortunately, you're out of town. But I think this is going to be, we want to show people by the time they leave, for the people who attend this event, and they come at 6, hopefully order dinner, and then the program starts at 8. But I think anybody that shows up when they leave, they're going to have a full comprehensive understanding of the swindle that went down by the Democrats in 2013 when they took over total oversight and eliminated Republicans from any oversight on our absentee ballot boards and in our early voting centers. And what steps they can do to make good use of their time this year and next, while the legislature's banging their heads against the wall going into gridlock.
So again, that's May 6th, next Thursday. Where at, Andy?
Oh, didn't I get this? Thank you, Gary. It's at Willie McCoy's restaurant. It's up on Highway 169 in Champlin.
And Champlin. There's more than one Willie McCoy.
There's 2.
So you want to make sure it's the Champlin one.
On 169, I think it's on our website somewhere. But yeah, May 6th, Thursday, 6 o'clock. Liberty Tea Party Patriots, a group that's been run for a long time by Mary Hamlaw, who you all know.
Yep.
And she's been doing a phenomenal job. And it's we're looking forward to the opportunity because we get to finally really go into detail on the stuff we've been working on for the last 16 months.
Well, thank you very much. We've had Andy Cilek from Minnesota Voters Alliance, that's mnvoters.org, and Kim Crockett also with the Minnesota Voters Alliance. Thank you very much for your dedication to this. I mean, especially Andy, and you've been this 16 years, and there's great things that you've done for the citizens of Minnesota. So I just want to thank you personally. I'm
only one small piece, thank you. But as long as you don't mess with my ballot, Gary, I won't mess with yours.
And we as citizens, we need to take this very seriously, that we have to engage in this election process. One person, one vote is the integrity that we need to have and maintain for a republic. And without that, we become an anarchy. And so my encouragement is for you to take what you learned tonight, go to Minnesota Voters website, mnvoters.org, and learn more about this and talk about where you vote, if it's the city clerk, the county, or wherever, and maybe there's more information that you can gain to be a better service to you. So this is Gary Borgendale, and this is Alpha News and First Tuesday Conservative. So continue to watch as we have more conversations about conservative values as we continue to fight for our freedom here in Minnesota. Andy, Kim, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Gary.
Thanks for having us.
Have a good night.
You too.